I immediately released the hold I had on Caleb and straightened up. Leon, seeing what I saw, immediately jumped in to hold back a screeching, lunging Caleb, and I saw someone out of the corner of my eye move to help him. To my surprise, we had a sizable crowd watching the spectacle, but my eyes were only on one. I hated that I had lost control. I hated it more that I had lost control in front of her. I quickly straightened out my clothes and ran my hand through my hair. I needed to look as composed as possible for Grace. Grace, who was cowering in the doorframe, making herself as small as possible. Grace, whose sweet big eyes were closed in fear. Grace, who I could see shaking from head to toe because of something I did. I did this. Gracie, I whispered as I crouched down in front of her. She opened her eyes and looked at me with a fear in them I wished I could ease. It's okay. You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you. I promised. She gave me a questioning look as if to say, you turned on your own brother, you turned on your other brides, when will you turn on me? And that felt like a stab in the back that made me feel sick. I won't tolerate disrespect, I told her, and she whimpered, looking away from me. He will get what he deserves. You have nothing to fear. But even as I said those words I felt like I was lying to her. She had no idea what respect actually meant. Her old pack seemed to have mistreated her, making her misunderstand the word, and my words of comfort weren't actually comforting at all. It was her own sister who had treated her poorly, and here I was from an outsider perspective doing the same to my brother. I wanted to slap myself for that when I gently touched her face after a moment and forced her to look at me, trying to get her to see the sincerity in my eyes. You are safe, Gracie. It was just a scuffle. He did some horrible things he can't take back. I handled it poorly. I will handle it right now. Trust me? I pleaded. She hesitated a moment before nodding, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I stretched my arms out to help her up and she took them looking gracious. She was clearly still frightened, but she seemed to have it under control, which was a start. Once we were both standing, I turned back to the sizable crowd that had gathered and regained my Alpha King composure. I was not the man to be messed with, and brother or not, there would be consequences. I turned toward my brother, Leon, and another pack member that I knew as Jason. Caleb was still fighting to get out of their grips, but he still when he saw me paying attention to him. Back for more, brother? He asked with a laugh etched in his face. I smiled at him coldly, and his face fell. Due to my brother, Caleb's, repeated transgressions against your Alpha King and you Beta, as well as several other members of the pack, I have decided that a severe punishment is now necessary. There was a murmur among the crowd as more people seemed to be joining to see what was going on. I opened the pack link so everyone could be aware of what was happening. Caleb laughed out loud, clearly not believing I would do anything of any substance. I hereby declare, I continued loudly, that Caleb's sonnet will have the choice to be exiled or have a lifelong imprisonment. The choice of his punishment is up to him. The crowd let out a simultaneous gasp and Caleb looked at me in shock. He had never expected I would go that far, but I was the Alpha King, and he had threatened what was mine. Reese, surely you can't mean that. Caleb tried. I am your brother. Your twin. And I gave you warning after warning after warning, Caleb. You should have heard me. You should have listened. You made your choices. Not me. I tried to help you. You chose not to stop. You had no remorse for the damage you've done to your so-called family. I should have done this a long time ago, but I chose to believe you could change. But you won't. You made that very clear today. So, no more chances. Please Reese, he begged, the panic in his voice so real, I almost gave in. I am your brother, and this is harsh to anyone. I promise I will do better. You've had chances, I repeated. I have given you ample chances, more than I ever should have. So, make a choice, or I will make it for you. I snuck a peek at Grace. Her face was pale, and I knew she was uncomfortable with what was happening, but she didn't show it. She stood tall, her blonde hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, for once not falling into her face. I was so proud of her bravery that I almost forgot that we had a whole crowd around us as I stared at her. Key word, almost. And when I remembered, I forced myself to look away from her and back at my brother. Reese, you can't be serious. What am I supposed to do? It is no longer my problem. I replied. If you can't make a choice, I will make it for you. You would use your alpha power on me? Your own brother? His eyes glowed with fury, and I could tell his wolf was fighting for control. Yes. I said calmly, but coldly. So, what is it going to be? Lifelong imprisonment or banishment? And we were met with silence as the question hung in the air between us. I could feel the intense gaze of everyone around us, but I didn't take my eyes off of my brother. Caleb looked calm, but I could see his inner turmoil to stay or go, but he had to make a choice. He was discrediting everything I had built. Discrediting me, my beta, taking our honor, hurting the people he was supposed to love. It was too much. He wasn't supposed to do this to his family. He should have taken his warnings more seriously. May I have time to pack my belongings? Caleb said, finally meeting my eyes. Yes. I responded coolly. Then I choose banishment. Caleb answered just as coolly. I sighed and nodded. Beta Leon will supervise. You have an hour and a half. Kale. He grimaced, but nodded, standing on his own 2 feet, free of the people who had been restraining him. I nodded for them to go and stood there for a moment, feeling a little lost. I was losing my brother, and despite what he had done, I felt heavy about my decision. He was my twin after all. We might not have been close, but he was my other half. A small gentle hand touched my arm, bringing me back to reality. I looked down to see Grace's steady hand of encouragement, knowing what it must have just taken her to touch me first. I gave her a small smile and turned back toward the crowd. You may all head on to dinner, I told them, pulling Grace's hand into my own. She looked hesitant but pulled out her chalkboard and stabilized it against the wall before beginning to write. You okay? She asked. The temptation was too real. I kissed the back of her hand before reluctantly letting it go, so I wouldn't do something like that again. I will be, I told her. She nodded in understanding, and didn't ask any more questions. I'm going to go talk to Sawyer. Are you alright going to dinner alone now? She nodded again, and gave me a small smile. I wanted right then and there to wrap her up and bury my face in her neck, but I contained my desires and moved further away. I watched her walk to the steps, and I headed back upstairs to my office to call Sawyer. Hello? He answered slightly breathlessly. Hey, did you hear the mind link? I asked, now regretting broadcasting it out to everyone. No, I'm just finishing up a surgery right now. You know that I block it during that. Sawyer answered with annoyance in his voice. Is there an emergency? Not quite an emergency, but definitely a situation. Don't talk to anyone until you talk to me. How long till you're done? My part will be done in about 10 minutes. He answered, but I could hear the slight anxiety now in his voice. Okay. I answered. Come straight to my office when why? Oh, you're done. We need to talk. Did I do something wrong? It was a hesitant question that made my heart hurt. As tough as he was, he struggled sometimes with being a doctor and my gamma, and he always worried that he wasn't enough of either. No, Sawyer, you did nothing wrong. I'll tell you everything when you get here, I said in my gentlest big brother voice. I sat with my head in my hands in silence until I heard my brother's familiar knock. Come in, I called out. Sawyer opened the door hesitantly and moved slowly till he was seated in the chair across from me at the desk. What's going on? He asked nervously. There is no easy way to say this, I started calmly. However, our brother has made some choices that I can no longer ignore. Did he do something to Grace? Sawyer interrupted in a panic. No. I mean, nothing more than flirting. I was glad to see at least one of my brothers seemed to care about her. No, he slept with Heather, Leon's wife. No, Sawyer breathed. Yeah, I answered, not sure how to break the news. As you know, this isn't his first transgression. I have warned him many times, Sawyer, but enough is enough. I've let enough slide. I have decided to severely punish him, but I gave him a choice. Banishment or lifelong imprisonment. Sawyer's eyes widened and he looked at me in horror. What did he choose? His voice was just above a whisper, and I remembered how much younger he was. He didn't often show his age, but he looked every bit the younger brother in this moment. He chose banishment. I answered. So, this is it? Sawyer asked. You can still say goodbye, he's packing his things right now. But you won't be able to disclose any information to him from here on out. Sawyer nodded, he looked devastated. I understand. I tried to tell him I know, Sawyer, I cut him off gently. He made his own choices though. You hold no responsibility for the things he did. Sawyer nodded, be you. The solemn expression he wore didn't ease. May I be dismissed? He asked. I nodded and he left without a backward glance. I stayed in my office for a little while trying to keep my emotions in check. It was harder than I thought it would be. I didn't know if this was the right thing to do or not, but I felt as though nothing else had gotten through to my brother, and he needed to be held to the same standards as everyone else. His behavior had gotten out of hand, and I knew that, but it didn't make it any easier. He's ready to leave. Leon mind-linked me. Coming. I replied, and I headed straight out to the front of the pack house. I forced myself to be calm, despite the fact that I wanted to beg him to hear me and just to do better. to apologize and actually feel remorse. But I knew I was just kidding myself with those thoughts. Here. I handed him the wad of cash and a credit card. This should be enough to live on for a while. No other pack will be able to help you. You will be completely isolated. I wish it didn't have to end like this. My words seemed to make matters worse, and you could cut the tension with a knife. No one so much as breathed for a moment. I could see Caleb's wolf fighting for control, and the hostility and unease in his eyes made me realize he might actually try to fight me for my title. I gave him a moment to try and gain control, but if he couldn't I would have to force the matter, using my alpha command. Caleb, I warned, letting my own wolf come out a little. Caleb's wolf seemed to give him back control as he glared at me before walking toward his car and getting in. The engine revved when my brother's mind link blared through my head. I know secrets that can destroy this pack, and I will not be tossed aside so easily. You have made a mistake, brother. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I flinched as his words echoed in my head and his car sped off into the distance. 10 years of mating and marriage, he destroyed in 2 days. The one he did it, and the one I found out. Leon said sadly from his spot next to me. Now there's no trust, and a whole lot of hurt. I put my hand on Leon's shoulder, but there was nothing I could say to make him feel better. All I could think about was my brother's warning. I knew if he ever so much as targeted Grace, he would be a dead man. And I couldn't help but think that I might just have to kill my own brother in the end. The Alpha King had mentioned that I should go to dinner, but after the whole showdown with his brother on the 3rd floor, I found myself not hungry in the slightest. I had walked in on them fighting and the fear I had felt in that moment had been too much. I was used to physical violence being used on me, but to see it and not be a part of it was just as scary. I had found myself so terrified that the Alpha King would turn on me, but also that he would get hurt. I was so lost in my head, I paid no attention to where I was going. My newfound freedom seemed to be getting the best of me, and I had found myself near the medical bay that was on the 1st floor even though I had never been to this one before. I immediately noticed Dr. Sawyer organizing supplies. Whatever he was doing seemed to be repetitive, and probably a little soothing, but the sadness on his face was undeniable, and it looked like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I slowly approached him from the side, so I wouldn't startle him, but it didn't seem to quite work the way I had hoped it would. "Hey Grace, I didn't see you come in," he said tiredly. I gave him a small smile and wrote on my chalkboard. "You okay?" "No really," he answered sadly. I nodded in understanding. I gestured to the outside, hoping he would get what I meant. "Why didn't I go say goodbye?" he asked, clarifying what I was asking. I nodded, yes. My brother, Caleb, has made choices for a long time that I haven't agreed with. He was his own downfall. It didn't matter how many chances he got, no matter how many times we tried to save him from himself, he was always going to self-destruct. It just makes me sad. I was closer with him than he was with Sawyer, but my wolf and I mind-linked him our goodbyes. I just didn't want to see him. It would make me sadder. I frowned. I understood why it would make him sadder, but it was weird to think about both Dr. Sonnet and his wolf both occupying his brain and body. I had never had a wolf to connect with and I wondered how it worked. I also had never heard the word mind-linked. I know Sawyer had mentioned it before and so had the Alpha King, but what they meant, I had no idea what they meant. Wolf talks? I finally asked with my chalkboard. Sawyer looked at me in surprise. Yeah, my wolf talks all the time. He rarely shuts up in my head. Sawyer answered, but there was confusion in his voice. To you? I wrote out again. Yes, but not only me, he can also mind-link others. Sawyer answered, stopping what he was doing to now give me his full attention. Oh. I didn't know how to ask any more questions. I couldn't spell anything I wanted to say. It didn't feel worthy of being speech-worthy. And I didn't know how to gesture it to make any sense. I know you don't have a connection to a wolf, Sawyer seemed to be picking his word choice cautiously. But didn't your old pack ever talk about their own wolves around you? I shook my head. No, I wrote on my board before adding. But no talk. What? Sawyer frowned and reread my board several times before he seemed to get what I was saying. I mean, yeah, even if they didn't really talk to you, I would have expected you to know how wolves communicate, both with their humans and through mind-link. It's like a vital part of werewolf culture. I have never even been to a pack where they didn't mind-link or where wolves talking to their human wasn't like common knowledge. They hated me. I responded on my chalkboard uneasily. Still, when you were working there was never like talk about the things people's wolves were saying? Or their wolves complaining about not wanting to work? I frowned and thought about it for a minute before shaking my head. No. I had never heard anybody talk about their wolves the way Sawyer was. Was that wrong? When they needed someone in the pack house, did they send you or did they use silent communication? Because silent communication is sort of what mind linking is. We don't have to speak, but we still can talk to each other through our wolf's ability. The way he described the mind link made sense, but I didn't think my old pack had used it. I thought back to the day the monster thing had terrorized the pack, and how just before it Alpha King Reese's eyes had sort of glazed over, sort of becoming unfocused. My old pack had never done anything like that. I couldn't even remember ever seeing anyone so much as shift. I had never really thought about it before, but now it had me questioning everything. Me. I wrote. Sent me. Or other served dash I had no idea how to spell servant. But you don't talk? Sawyer questioned. How did you tell them? Got trouble. I wrote. Sawyer nodded in understanding. Well, sending other servants I guess makes sense if they didn't mind link. He said tiredly. You should go tell Reese everything you just told me though. It might help with our investigation. I trouble? I wrote out. Not sure if I was even spelling trouble correctly. No, Grace, Sawyer said gently. This is just a very odd thing that doesn't make any sense. Reese just needs to know. Would you like me to come with you? I hesitated for a moment and then nodded. My nerves were on fire, and I could feel the butterflies in my tummy. The Alpha King had just banished his own brother. It would take way less for him to banish me. So despite Sawyer's words, I was scared to death to tell the Alpha King what we had just learned, and maybe, just maybe, Sawyer would be able to help me explain what we had just uncovered about my old pack. I walked with Sawyer in silence back to the main area of the house, and up the million stairs toward the Alpha King's office. My mind was racing. How was I going to explain what Sawyer and I had been talking about? I was only able to talk with him because he asked questions and could follow my line of thinking. How was I to explain what we just talked about from the beginning without the leading questions? How was I to know what was important? I had spent most of my life alone. I had never had a friend before. I had never been someone they even held simple conversations near, as if I would poison their thoughts or something. I had no idea what mattered or even what was different from this pack because I had barely even been in this pack. My anxiety was borderline out of control, and I tried to take a steadying breath. I didn't even have a wolf. How was I supposed to know how any of this worked? My steps faltered as I felt a faint and subtle reaction within me when I had thought about not having a wolf. What the hell was that? I didn't even have words for how that felt or how unsettling it was. It wasn't my reaction. How could it not be my reaction? I was losing it. We reached the Alpha King's door and I reached out and knocked gently before I could back out. Enter. The Alpha King called out. Sawyer opened the door and ushered me through it and further into the office till I was standing at the Alpha King's desk. What brings you two here? The Alpha King's gaze was tired and cold, which in turn made me even more nervous. Come to tell me you want Grace for yourself, Sawyer? That you plan to sleep with her too? I felt my cheeks flush, and I watched Sawyer's face morph into rage. That was uncalled for, and you know it. Apologize. Because we aren't the ones you are mad at. The Alpha King looked surprised for a moment before his face softened to grief. You're right. I'm sorry. Now, why are you here? I looked to Sawyer, not knowing where to begin. I had no idea what I was supposed to say. My pack, I wrote slowly on my chalkboard when Sawyer was no help. Did not dash I froze and realized I had no idea how to spell mindlink. It hadn't been in any of the books Alana and I had gone over. This time, I fully turned to Sawyer and signed the word help, then wrote an M on the board so he could see what I was talking about. Oh, he said in surprise when he realized what I was talking about. Mindlink. Mindlink, what's this about mind linking? Alpha King Reese demanded angrily as I scribbled the letters that Sawyer had just told me. Fear surged through me as I flashed him the board. He was going to banish me, just like he did his brother. Or worse. Maybe he'd torture me so I'd remember my place. My old place was really where I seemed to belong. Your old pack doesn't mind link? He asked, his voice cold and not inquisitive at all, and all hope I had that he would understand faded. I shook my head, fearing his wrath that I had seen in full force earlier this afternoon. What kind of sick game are you playing, Grace? He shouted, making me cower back slightly behind Sawyer as the Alpha King grabbed my chalkboard out of my hands. What is it that you are hiding? You're just like the fucking rest of them. I looked around trying to figure out how to convey what I needed to. I saw a water bottle on his desk and before I could back out, I quickly cleared all important looking documents off his desk as another what the hell escaped his lips. I quickly started trying to draw with the water. I drew the Alpha King and a wolf equals 1 and then I drew the Alpha King and a wolf equals 2 before stepping back and looking at him expectantly. I knew it wasn't super clear, but I was hoping it was enough to at least start him asking questions. What does this mean? The Alpha King grumbled. Sawyer moved to see it better and it took him a minute before he said, okay, I get it. She's saying she thought that the wolf part of us was just our consciousness in different forms. She didn't know until we were talking that the wolf part of us is independent in a sense. She didn't realize we talked to our wolves or that they had their own thoughts that are separate from ours. Right, Grace? I nodded, confirming exactly that. Alpha King Reese looked up at him in surprise and frustration. How did you get that? Sawyer shrugged. She drew the same image with a 1 and a 2. And she was surprised downstairs when I said our wolves talked to us. It made sense. I nodded and began to gesture again. I pointed to myself, then gestured all around me, signed no, before pointing to my eye and finger spelled wolf. Your pack didn't show their wolf side? Sawyer asked. I shook my head no. The Alpha King ran his hand through his hair exhaustedly, and surprise was etched on his face. Reese, you okay? Sawyer asked when he didn't say anything. This is bizarre. Alpha King Reese said after a long moment. It doesn't make any sense. There has to be something we are missing. I asked Grace to tell you because I thought it might help the investigation. Sawyer said hesitantly, and I realized then that he was closer to my age than Alpha King Reese was. Well, it leads me to far more questions, that's for sure. It's gotta be a part of a larger conspiracy. Thank you for sharing, Grace. I'm sorry I snatched this in anger, that was not right of me. You were just trying to help. He handed me back my chalkboard. Tomorrow we will return to the Red Blood Pack to uncover the truth. A surprise raid seems necessary. We will leave first thing in the morning to hopefully arrive by nightfall. Sawyer nodded, but I felt fear. If this backfired, it would backfire specifically on me, and I had no idea what to expect. But there was something in the Alpha King's voice when he said, tonight we plan, tomorrow we get the answers we'd been waiting for. And I realized if he asked, I would probably follow him anywhere. Thanks everyone for tuning in and listening to this fantastic story. Just a quick heads up, all the books featured on this channel come from Read Inc., your ultimate hub for staying on top of web novel updates, so you'll never miss a chapter again. I've already dropped the link to this book in the comments section below, so jump in, share your thoughts, and chat with fellow readers.